I think in the last episode we had mentioned that if neither Demidov or Lindstrom are there at 5, that they could and maybe should lean towards taking a defenseman. Um, I don't know how clear cut that is. I don't, this is just me speculating, but I don't know if that's clear cut dividing line where it's Demidov, Lindstrom, or we open it up to other candidates.
Mm-hmm.
Iginla and Seneca to me, without putting a percentage on it, just seem to be possibilities of some sort, and that's just a hunch. I mean, it just you look at their player profiles, and they seem to be high upside plays that could warrant the consideration of maybe the Canadians realizing maybe number 5 is too early to pick them, but who cares? Like, we have the 5th pick. It's not our fault, and it's if we like the player, just take him, and we don't really care if it's considered a reach or whatever. And so I don't know. I don't know where those guys are compared to some of the D that could be available, namely a Salayev or a Zboboyam or a Parik or whatever. I don't know where they are, but I don't know. The more I think about it, the more I feel like it's at least a possibility that they just decide that they don't care what anyone else thinks. And frankly, they've proven that they don't care what anyone else thinks over the last 2 drafts. And they just take the forward that they like at that spot.
Sure. Well, I think that one big factor will be, do they determine that Iginla or Seneca are potential future first liners? If they're just top 6 guys and they think that they've got a number 1 defenseman that's at their disposal, like that's assuming that Lindstrom and Demidov are taken, for example. If you have to choose between a guy who could be a number 1 defenseman or a second line winger, that's to me, that's the choice is obvious. But if they evaluate that either Iginla or Seneca is on track to become a first line winger, then it's a lot more debatable. So I think that we don't know, we're not privy to that information as to exactly how high they esteem those kids and they see their ceiling to be right at this point. Obviously, they'll tell us more after they've drafted one of these kids. But I think that this is a factor. It's just you have to be sure that if you go with let's say the next tier of forward, that their ceiling is still high enough. Otherwise, you just draft for need and you forget about the best player available.
Well,
and that's the wrong thing to do 10 days out of 10.
Well, this is where I see somewhat of a similarity between Slav, Lindstrom, and Seneca, in the sense that they all showed a sharp rise in their development curve late, closer to the drafts. Even though Seneca, I think in his days playing in the GTA, was one of the top players as a younger player, but still, the way he figured things out, his late growth spurt, learning how to play in his new body, learning how to skate with his new body, get his balance, get his bearings. A lot of it kind of tracks with Slav's kind of progression a little bit and learning how to play at his size. And in a different way, Lindstrom's, which is more based on just playing at an elite level and learning how to make decisions quickly, how to see things on the ice, and just learning this caliber of hockey later than most kids. If you look at Seneca, and even based on everything he said at the draft, at the combine rather, to the media and presumably to the teams themselves, this is a kid that's still learning how to play with this big frame, a frame that could very potentially still be growing. That's an enticing package. And if you look at their draft history, kids whose development curve was on a steeper incline closer to the draft are kids that this administration has liked a lot. And to me, Seneca kind of fits that model just based on nothing. This is no inside information or anything. This is just looking at their draft history and seeing a kid that kind of fits that curve as the players. Well, the player they took number one overall. I think even Reinbacher, you can make the argument that applied. So I'm wondering if that applies to Seneca as well.
Yeah. Do you think that the 2.5 inches that favor Seneca will give him an edge over Iginla necessarily? If they
Well,
were
that
to choose between one and
combined
the
with the
other?
hands. I mean,
Yeah.
the hands are ridiculous, right? So it's. I mean, yeah, maybe. I mean, I think there's a lot to like about Iginla. He's basically been raised from birth as a pro hockey player. Like, I mean, there's a lot to like about TJ Iginla. An elite shot. Uh, you know, played big in big games. You know, there's a lot of things that they like. But yeah, I think as far as the curve is concerned, and yes, you know, Iginla had a difficult season last year in Seattle, was healthy scratched. So you could argue that he's also on a steep upswing, but plus the fact he's going to play center in Kelowna next year is probably pretty interesting to teams, you know, to see that he could be a possibility at center. But yeah, I just feel like the late growth spurt element of Seneca and just the adjustment that he's making to that and his late season push offensively and in the playoffs could just be a reflection of him just beginning to tap the potential of his size and his reach and learning how to use it effectively. I don't know. I see similarities there with Lindstrom,
Yeah.
with Slav, and even with Reinbacher. And so just judging on if you can use that limited sample of how this administration looks at these kids, I think Seneca kind of fits that model, assuming Lindstrom obviously is gone.
We can even go back to the previous administration because KK was a late riser too.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So
Yeah.
I guess that's the argument against doing something like that. But KK, I mean, KK was always a tall, lanky kid. You know, I mean, you know,
Yeah.
that's kind of, and he also grew up in a very pro style environment, right? So it was like, you know, he didn't have a Hall of Famer for a dad, but he did have, you know, a professional hockey coach as a dad. And so he grew up basically at the rink of the local Liga team, surrounded by Finnish pro hockey players his whole life. So
Yeah.
it's not a guarantee that growing up in that environment makes you into a good pro, I guess is the, the thought there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just wanted to add that because that's just a thought that came to me this week as I was sort of looking at it. And I think there are some similarities in Seneca's development path that could maybe entice the Canadians to take him. But that's
Yeah.
just me spitballing.
Okay.